welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian Wei. On today's program, Turkish leader Erdogan visits Putin in Russia, a big step towards rebuilding ties that shattered after Turkey downed a Russian fighter jet last year. Can the rift be mended? And the Brazilian Senate takes a vote on whether to send suspended President Dilma Rousseff to a final trial that would decide her fate. What does the future hold for the country of Brazil? Turkish President Recep Erdogan is meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday in the city of St. Petersburg in Russia. This is the first meeting between the two leaders following the thawing of tensions over Turkish downing of a Russian jet late last year. The meeting also comes after Ankara's ties with the West continue to strain. Will the trip heal the deep rifts between Turkey and Russia? Before we go to our discussion, let's take a look at this.
Wiping the slate clean, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan arrives in Russia on Tuesday to meet with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin as part of efforts to rebuild shattered relations. It's their first meeting since the two strongmen leaders began a war of words on a bitter feud over Ankara's downing of a Russian warplane.
Today's visit of yours, despite the very difficult political situation in Turkey, shows that we all want our dialogue to be resumed and our relations to be restored for the sake of the Russian and Turkish people.
The region is expecting a lot from us from a political point of view. I believe that our cooperation will make a big contribution to the resolution of many problems in the region.
Months of political punches and provocations began to subside following an apology by the Turkish president in late June. Putin accepted the apology and immediately signaled that Moscow would end measures against food imports and construction firms from Turkey. While ties with Russia have begun to heal, Turkey's relations with traditional allies have kept faltering. In the wake of the failed July 15th coup attempt in Turkey, a NATO member state, Erdogan made it clear that he felt let down by the United States and the European Union.
Turkish leadership considers Russia as a significant partner, especially with the latest coup attempt on 15th of July. Putin was one of the first leaders to call Erdogan, and he declared unconditional support for the Turkish government, the democratically elected government of Turkey, against the coup. And this was very interesting, especially at a time when the responses from Turkey's traditional allies, the European Union and the United States, were much more muted.
However, some fundamental differences remain between Turkey and Russia, as neither side has altered their stance on Syria. Erdogan insisted to Russian media that Assad must still go, a position that Putin strongly opposes. As they have in the past, these thorny issues could still stand in the way of mending strained ties.
For more on the Turkish leader Erdogan's visit to Russia, we are joined in Ankara by Hüseyin Baci, who is a professor in the Department of International Relations at the Middle East Technical University. Welcome, Professor. Also joining us from Washington, D.C. in the U.S.,
Thank you.
We're having Dr. Bülent Alireza, who is the Director and Senior Associate for the Turkey Project at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Welcome as well, Dr. Alireza. May I begin with you, Professor Baci? How much do the two sides need one another strategically?
I think, geopolitically speaking, both need each other, and this is the historical reality. But at the moment, not only geopolitical, but also geo-economical need is very important. Turkey had Russia as the first trade partner. In 2014, Turkey had $135 billion trade with Russia, from the energy to tourism, and Russia was number one. And Turkey has been number 4 in Russian trade relations, and Turkey is the biggest consumer of Russian natural gas. The second point is, of course, that Putin and Tayyip Erdogan, they are both leaders who have been in recent years very much excluded in quotation by the West and strongly criticized because of their tendencies to get more authoritarian structures of the states. And now these two leaders come together, and I think they will open a new chapter in the relations.
All right.
And they realize today, that they need each other more than ever.
Dr. Ali Reza, how strong a relationship could be when two men have a common enemy? How much will that make a friendship?
You know, with reference to the to the question that you asked first, I think it's Turkey that, which needs the relationship to recover to its earlier position than Russia. And the fact that it was President Erdogan who sent a letter of apology at the end of June, and then has followed up by this visit to St. Petersburg, I think confirms that. Now, you talk about a common enemy. I assume you mean the West. Well, the reality is that Turkey is still very much part of the Western Alliance, NATO. President Erdogan participated in the Warsaw Summit recently, which took measures to counter Russian aggression in Ukraine and possible Russian aggression in Eastern Europe. And you know, Turkey continues to be an aspirant for EU membership, but you're absolutely right. There are strains in the relationship between Turkey and the EU, and Russia is taking advantage of this in order to weaken NATO. But they have differences, notably on Syria, that we may get into, which may limit the limits of the rapprochement.
Dr. Ali Reza, you said something very interesting. You know, when we have things to do, we usually do a pro and a con list. So on the pro list for Turkey to getting closer to Russia, of course, there is the possibility of having more market, more energy, trade, as well as tourism, and also an option, with except an option besides the West. But on the con side, in a way, that would alienate Turkey from the rest of the West even further. So the question is, how much effort will Ankara make in this regard? Or is this pretty much a superficial gesture, just suggesting, see, I have another friend in Moscow?
Well, that's obviously a factor in Erdogan's calculations when he meets Putin. The fact that the meeting is taking place at all is significant in itself. The timing, coming, as your report said, within a few weeks of the failed coup, which exacerbated the tensions between Turkey and the West, it makes it even more significant. But, you know, whether they go beyond this, whether this moves beyond a tactical feint to a strategic reversal by Turkey is a matter of discussion. I don't think we're at that point yet. Now, Putin will undoubtedly take advantage of Erdogan's willingness to come to Moscow and to break with its Western allies, at least symbolically. But whether Turkey will go beyond this, and I don't know. Now, you mentioned the economic aspect of the relationship. Now, it's very significant that Russia never interrupted its supply of gas to Turkey throughout the months of tension since November. The trade relationship is heavily weighted in favor of the Russians because they supply most of Turkey's gas, almost 2/3. It's Turkey that really needs the economic relationship to recover because it's Turkish exports to Russia which suffered, and it's Turkish tourism revenues from Russian tourists that have suffered. So even on the economic front, it is really Turkey that is in need of the relationship much more than Russia.
One of the things, Professor Bashi, it's very important. That is, what do the two countries really want? What kind of countries they aspire to be? Your country, Turkey, and the country of Russia. Today, when we listened to Russian President Vladimir Putin during a welcoming ceremony for the Turkish President Erdogan, the Russian president was saying one thing that attracted a lot of attention. He said, when he was being quoted on Russia's gestures toward Turkey on the issue of the military coup. He said, "We are against any actions that are going against the Constitution." And yet, Professor Baji, as we all know, President Erdogan is possibly working on the changes of the Constitution to enlarge the power of a presidency. So how should we understand the specific quote coming from the Russian president on this occasion to his Turkish counterpart, if I could use that word?
I think, first of all, the Turkish president is very much disappointed by the Western leaders who were not in the first line to call him and support him. It was one of the foreign presidents, Vladimir Putin, who called him, supported that he is definitely behind him and is against the coup. Now, President Erdogan is elected by the people, 52% got, and is definitely not a classical president as we used to have before. In theory, is having all the authorities according to 1982 Constitution, but he was de facto using a different type of presidential acts, presidential authority, which is probably now going to be much more stronger after this coup d'etat more, is now getting stronger and stronger and having more and more authority, which makes him, of course, number one man in Turkey, not the prime minister. And the parliament is, in this respect, getting weaker. So we move with this type of action now to have much more stronger political leader as president. But according to existing constitutional law, is violating the 1982 Constitution, which is valid,
right.
But in de facto, president has taken so many measures that he is now the strongest man in the country.
All right. And we're looking forward to some of the live signals. Oh, there we go. Press conference live between the Russian President Vladimir Putin and also the Turkish President Erdogan right now, taking place in St. Petersburg.
Our history of our relationship had different periods, but first of all, I would like to say that despite the complex internal political situation in Turkey, Mr. Erdogan seized the opportunity to come and see us in St. Petersburg, and it shows the interest of our Turkish partners in renewal of relationship with Russia. And today, first in a closed circle, and then generally with delegations, we talked about our plans, our priorities, and further actions, so we can re-establish inter-state connections. The top priority was re-establishment of our bilateral relationship. If we remember, last year there was 23% drop in our businesses, and it was a very sad situation. Now we have to reanimate our economic cooperation. And this process has already started, but it might take some time. In 22nd of July, we had a delegation of economical bloc of Turkish government. The special attention is paid to investitions and realizations of effective projects. It's very important that our business circles support us, and that after this conference we will have opportunity to talk to heads of major companies of both countries. We also talked about the limitations and embargoes issues with Turkish businesses. We also discussed the scientific cooperation in 2016 and 2019. We agreed to renew main mechanisms of our cooperation. We also ordered both countries' relevant institutions to have strategic planning meeting. I also would like to emphasize that our trade and economic cooperation, the very important place in this is energy sector. And we also discussed projects in these spheres. Continuation of the work which will require also political decisions. I'd like also to say that certain decisions we talked to, the Turkish side has already made decisions on the nuclear power station plant constructions and Turkish stream pipeline. On the agenda today was also return of our tourists to Turkey. I hope that we will manage to achieve a pre-crisis level of our tourism, and I think it's just a matter of time. We also looked in this regard. We also looked at charter flights re-establishment, and I think it will be soon resolved. Also, we discussed embargo, Russia's embargo on Turkish goods and construction work. We work on this and we will resolve it very soon. And I would like to say that the major developments in work in our major projects never actually stopped. We still have major companies building roads around St. Petersburg. In details, we exchanged views about our views about international problems. We agreed that after this press conference, we will discuss separately. We will discuss all matters related to Syria regularization and settlement. We have joint understanding about the fact that the war on terrorism is the most important. At the end, I would like to thank President Erdogan for open discussion, sincere discussion today of all negotiations and confirmation that we have everything we need to work together, not just in our region, but all around the world. And Russia is ready to do this work. Thank you for your attention.
That, of course, is the Russian President Vladimir Putin in a joint press conference with the Turkish President Erdogan over there. We heard, gentlemen, the briefings that the Russian president is trying to provide to the international press about what has achieved during the bilateral meeting between the two presidents. He talked about, if I could recount a bit, some of the consequences of the cooling of relations, 23% drop in the businesses between the two countries. And now he said, with this cooperation and this meeting, likely to go back to the pre-crisis level. He talked about scientific cooperation, the energy cooperation, nuclear power project, and also some of the construction projects going on between the two countries, tourism of Russian tourists going back to Turkey, lifting embargoes against the Turkish goods, and all of these. And he also talked about one thing, which is the international problems, as he used the word. He said they are going to discuss separately all the issues related to Syria. What do you make of it, Dr. Ali Reza, briefly about all of these briefings coming from the Russian president? Are we seeing breakthrough?
Not yet. I mean, the easy part of the dialogue was obviously the re-establishment of close economic relations, Like I said, the energy relationship is continued. Now what will happen is that Turkey will benefit from the lifting of the restrictions from the Russian side. Now the fact that President Putin has said that they will be discussing the political problems seriously, differently or separately, excuse me,
right,
shows that those are much more difficult than the economic issues. And given the differences on Syria and other issues, we'll see how far they can go at this meeting or subsequent meetings that might lie ahead.
Professor Bashi, we are going back to the press conference, but 30 seconds for you to comment a bit about the earlier briefings coming from the Russian president. 30 seconds for you.
I think this is a very interesting statement by President Putin that he is going to establish the peer relations as before the shutdown of the plane. And I think it is like the car was moving, the train was getting out of the rail, and now it is again putting on the right way, and then it will continue. I think Turkey and Russia in the long run, they have to work together as before.
And now let's go back to the press conference going on right now in St. Petersburg between the two presidents from Russia and also Turkey. Listen in.
In that area, we will increase our cooperation in defense industry, and in relation to the regional issues, we've decided to set up a three-country formation, including Azerbaijan, Russian Federation, and Turkey. And it is important that we take steps to speed up Akkuyu nuclear plant project. And by making these moves, we, God willing, improve our relationship between Ankara and Moscow and present it as a relationship of friends. As you know, on the 15th of July, Turkey was subjected to the bloodiest and most detestable attempts at a coup d'etat. The Fethullah terrorist organization was behind that attempt, failed attempt. But of course, because of all these, despite of all these problems, we will continue our bilateral relations, and our decisions will be implemented. And we will work on improving and putting into action the Turkish Stream project as well. Our respective ministries will be working hard to speed up that process. The fact that the President, Mr. President, was one of the first to contact us, to express us his support after the failed coup attempt is very significant and has been noted as such. Our relationship does not have only bilateral effects or importance. It is also important to reintroduce stability to our region. In a short moment, the two of us are going to have one-to-one discussions, and we are going to talk about these important matters in detail. And it is thanks to the popular support that we've received, our relationship have grown. My dear friend, Mr. President, and I have displayed a joint position, showing that we have the will to show to the rest of the world that we will be acting together as friendly countries. Turkish-Russian relationship will continue to
improve, and we believe that our relationship is much stronger than it used to be.
Right, that is the Turkish President Erdogan in a joint conference with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Of course, just some brief recount of what the Turkish president was saying just now. He talked about the two countries are coming back to in contact with one another, and it is a relationship of friends. That's the word he's been using. And he said it's going to have more than just bilateral effects, and the rest of the world are watching this. He said that it's the joint actions that the two countries are taking. Certainly, it seems that Professor Bachi, the president of Turkey is trying to use much more closer terms to describe the bilateral relations that the Russian president just now did. What do you make of this comparison, interestingly?
I think President's call for Vladimir Putin as my friend is very important after 9 months. The Turkish need for Russia in the long run in economic terms is out of question, and it seems that President is ready to open a new chapter in Turkish-Russian relations, making it much more wider in the long run. As you know, the Turkish-European Union relations at the moment is facing a great crisis.
And the president, yeah, we have talked about this already, but let me put on some new points over here. Professor Bashi, he was talking about the Turkish president one-on-one discussion with the Russian president, he said, on the other issues when it comes to international relations, including the issue of Syria. Can we expect any breakthrough as a result of that one-on-one? Usually, what would that mean? Briefly from you.
I think, President has stated this morning that Russia is the key player now for the peace process in Syria. It is first time that is said like this, and it is surprising to everyone, including myself. So I think there is a U-turn in Turkish foreign policy concerning the peace process in the Middle East and in Syria.
We are seeing a crossroad, it seems, Dr. Ali Reza, that Turkey is right now in, which side to go and how close to get to Russia. And what about the issue of Syria? Is that compromisable as a result of the quote-unquote friend relations? As we all know, it is no starter for Russia to get rid of the president of Syria. They believe it's others' internal affairs, should not interfere into it. So briefly from you, what do you make from the Turkish president, very briefly?
It's too early to say which way it's going to go in the bilateral discussions, because it was Syria that really led to the crisis between Turkey and Russia. They were okay before up to November, but the plane was shot down because the Russians were backing Assad through their air force. Now, if Turkey is willing to abandon its support for the opposition to President Assad and even accept the continuation of President Assad in office, then I think the Russians will be happy. But it will mean a major reversal in Turkish policy on Syria, and we're not at that point yet.
All right, that's going to be a huge change of scenarios of the prospect in the region. We don't know what's going to happen, but certainly very interesting. These two strongman politicians are meeting with one another for the moment. Thank you so much for the two of you also to join us, Bülent Ali Reza and also Hussein Bashi with us. Thank you. Really appreciate it, gentlemen. Stay with us here on World Insight. We got our final segment coming right up. Brazil's Senate votes to decide the fate of their suspended head of state, Dilma Rousseff, accused of manipulating finances ahead of the 2014 re-elections. So what's at stake? And now let's turn to Brazil. It was only less than 2 years ago that nearly 55 million Brazilians went to the polls to re-elect Dilma Rousseff as their president. Now, after being suspended for 3 months, Rousseff is standing on the edge of impeachment. The Brazil Senate is continuing the voting process on whether to put her on trial. It would only take a simple majority to move forward with the process, which will end with a final Senate vote late this month. Is Brazilian politics in trouble? Before our discussion, let's take a look at this.
Rousseff's in the balance. The Brazil Senate has started a new round of votes on Tuesday on whether to proceed with the impeachment trial of suspended President Dilma Rousseff. Last Thursday, on the eve of the Rio Olympics opening ceremony, a Senate committee agreed to move forward with the impeachment trial. In a 14-5 vote, the committee elected to try Rousseff for allegedly manipulating the government budget. After this decision, related documents were sent to the Senate for this week's vote. Rousseff has consistently denied the allegations, claiming they are part of a right-wing conspiracy against her.
Do I think it has been a fair trial based on all relevance? In summary, no. Unfortunately, what dominated were affirmations which were not based on fact. Everything is in place for her to leave.
In April, the lower house of the Brazilian parliament allowed the impeachment against President Rousseff to be presented to the Senate in a 367-137 vote. With a 55-22 vote on the 12th of May, the Senate approved the suspension of Rousseff's presidential powers and duties up to 180 days. Rousseff's vice president, Michel Temer, started serving as acting president. If a simple majority votes for impeachment this round, the full Senate will hold one last final session at the end of August. For that round, a two-thirds majority is required to remove Rousseff from office permanently. Interim President Michel Temer will remain in power for the remaining term until 2018. Brazil, a country deeply embroiled in financial crisis, has found itself in political chaos after a series of corruption scandals. Rousseff's impeachment might be an end to the centre-left Workers' Party after more than a decade of governance. But bringing Brazil's political turmoil to an end could take much more.
And for more on Brazil's impeachment case, we are now joined in the Beijing studio. Charles Tang with us, President of the Brazil-China Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Welcome, sir. Also in Washington, D.C., we're having Paulo Sotelo, who is the director of Brazil Institute of the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. And in Washington, D.C., we're also having Eric Farnsworth, who is the vice president of the American Society and Council of the Americas. Gentlemen, welcome to our program. So, Mr. Tang, you just directly come to China from Brazil. So what is your sense? President Rousseff go or likely to stay?
I think that it's almost certain that she will not survive the impeachment, and President Temer will probably come to the G20 as the definitive president rather than the interim president. And the impeachment was going to be delayed, and so President Temer said he did not want to come to the G20 as the interim president.
I see. Well, having said that, though, Mr. Sotelo, the economy in Brazil seemed to be getting a bit better. Of course, you cannot link that to a change of the president just over 1 month or two. But will this new economic current administration further?
Well, that is the hope of President Michel Temer and many others in Brazil. We are now in the third year of a recession. This is unprecedented in Brazil. If the President Temer, who is likely to be inaugurated as the new constitutional president on probably September 1st before Congress, if he is able to approve certain fiscal measures, austerity measures, I think he will help to establish some credibility in markets, reinforce confidence by investors. It is badly needed. For the Brazilian people, though, I think there will be a longer period of adjustment because unemployment rates are expected to continue to increase.
I see.
To the end of this year at least.
Are you going to see, Mr. Farnsworth, any new economic policies, financial policies coming from the current administration who's likely to be formally installed in Brazil? Will that have a big impact on the realities of the economy?
Well, thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate it very much. You know, the acting government really has already instituted a number of new policies, not just at the government level, but also from the central bank. And so those are beginning to have an impact. I think that Paulo Sotero referred to two things, though, that I think are of even greater importance. That is confidence and the ability of markets to really have a path forward in terms of a positive view of the economy, which is in very deep recession. So once business confidence returns, you'll have the return of investment, not just direct foreign investment, but frankly Brazilian investment. A lot of Brazilian investment has been delayed because of a corruption scandal that really isn't related to the impeachment process, and also because of political uncertainty as well. So those issues have to work themselves out, and once they do, I think you will see a return to growth.
But political uncertainty, does it really mean you get rid of one president having another one as a result of people's anger, and therefore you are in political stability? Or this is going to set a very dangerous precedent, Mr. Tang, that whenever there's national anger, whether you have very concrete evidence about the corruption toward the top official of the country or not, he or she has to go?
Well, I think that one of the things that Brazil must do, and there's a lot of talk about it, is the parliamentary system, whereby if there is a lot of anger, the government does go without big trauma. And I think that once the impeachment is defined, the economy will grow again. The Temer government has some very good policies stated. They have some very good ministers. And I think that they will be Brazil is an enormously wealthy country. Once the political instability disappears, the economy will grow.
But Mr.
again.
Tang, I have to follow up on that. I mean, coming from Brazil yourself, you know how hard it is to change a political system. And therefore, when you're talking about having more powers with the parliament, that would really take some time. So will that mean further length of political instability in the country? Despite of the fact, yes, there is a revival of the economy to only certain extent.
Well, I think that some of the stated policies of the government, like cutting costs, reducing the cost of the government to fit within the budget, to privatize all the companies.
Right.
One of the things I'm doing here is precisely to attract more investments to Brazilian privatization.
Yeah, but Mr. Tang, I'm talking about the political system. You talk about instill more powers to the parliament, but that takes time.
Sure.
And that certainly also is a constitution as well as legislative changes. So will that be done on time to make sure people really have confidence of so-called stability inside your country?
I think confidence has already grown because, you know, President Temer has stated some policies that gives confidence to the business environment and the investors.
Okay. Mr. Sotelo, is confidence more important when it comes to economic and business ties, or is confidence also important in the political stability? Are these two working with one another, or should we separate them in the circumstances of Brazil? Mr. Sotelo.
Well, the political side of this crisis is the most important, actually, although the economic side is what you see, mostly through unemployment, anxiety, etc. For a parliamentary system to be established in Brazil, it's probably a very good idea, defended, supported by many very well-informed policymakers and statesmen in Brazil. But in order for that to happen efficiently and effectively, we have to undergo a political system reform. We have built in Brazil a political system that is self-serving, that is not really responding to the interest of the country. The difficulties of addressing the fiscal issue in Brazil resides precisely in this political system that represents powerful interest groups in society. And we have to address this. We will address this in democracy, in debate, over time. This is a crisis that will probably going to last 3 to 5 years.
All right. And final question for the other two panelists. One is coming from the United States. The other is also working on Brazil-China business ties. So what kinds of projects, under the current circumstances, will flow to Brazil? What kind of project will go back on track despite of the previous turbulences in the country of Brazil? Let me have Mr. Tang first, and then I'll have Mr. Farnsworth.
Yeah, well, you know, the Chinese companies are investing massively into Brazil, because everybody realized the political instability ceases with the definition of the impeachment, the economy will rise again. So right now, the assets are inexpensive and very attractive returns and safe returns. So you take a company like China State Grid, it's buying massive amounts of power and energy companies in Brazil. Three Gorges has bought 5 hydroelectric power plants.
I can almost tell, Mr. Tang, you are in your capacity of Brazil-China Chamber of Commerce and Industry when you are saying all of this. And before we go, coming to Mr. Farnsworth, what do you make of it?
Well, I think that's exactly right. And we also have to remember that much of Brazil's economy is based on commodities. So when commodities prices begin to recover, whether it's oil or whether it's mining or what have you, you would anticipate greater investment flowing into those sectors as well. But there's a huge need for infrastructure development, no matter what the price of commodities are. I think you're going to see a continued attention to that. And I think you're going to see some attention to real estate as well. There's a possibility that the Brazilians are reforming some of their ownership laws in terms of real estate. That's a sector of opportunity. So there's a lot going on in Brazil in a positive way. Over time, I think the economy will recover.
Well, of course, now you have also the Olympics going on in Rio. Hopefully, it is also a momentum that will bring the economy back and more stability into the country. Thank you so much, gentlemen, the three of you, for being with us and sharing your insights into the country of Brazil. Charles Tang, Paulo Sotelo, and Eric Farnsworth. Really appreciate, gentlemen, for being with us. Thank you. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of our program, visit our website. Just type in World Insights CCTV News into your search engine. You'll be able to find us. Or you can also check out our YouTube channel. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone at the World Insight team, thanks for watching. And tune in again tomorrow for more insights from across China and around the world. Good night.